Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to come over and speak to you. I thought I would talk just a little bit about what's going on in transportation right now, at least with what Congress is doing, and then I'll open up for a couple of questions, which I probably won't be able to answer. I think you all are much bigger experts on transportation issues in your states, obviously, than I am. But we did work, as you all are well aware, we were able to pass a highway bill. The best news about it by far, it's a long-term bill. It's a 5-year bill. That was something that we had set out to do in the beginning. We had every intention of doing it. I'm very glad that it happened. It obviously gives you all a lot more opportunity when it comes to planning for projects in the future, not having to worry from one year to the next or even 1 month to the next at sometimes when it comes to those short-term extensions and short-term processes. It's a $305 billion bill. Coming out of the Highway Trust Fund. We did a few things in there that we're pretty proud of, but that $305 billion, a little bit more than we've had in the past. But by far, we did some things, tried to streamline. We collapsed about 5 agencies within the Department of Transportation that were redundant, trying to save some dollars there. We turned STP into a block grant program. We re-rolled the Transportation Alternatives Program into STP as well. And we increased that the states, or at least the federal government's match to the states at 55%. A couple other things that we did too, very pleased about when it came to EPA rules. As long as the states' rules are similar or close to what EPA is, we've given the option of the states to be able to use your own state environmental regulations when it comes to doing projects. The EPA has a nasty habit of slowing everything down and making it so darn much more expensive just through their rules, and a lot of those are new rules that have come out, and so what we're trying to do is pivot that to back to the states so the states can use their own rules. Bridge replacement program, fully funded, fully in place. That's something that obviously very important to our counties for those off-system bridges. I know in my own state of Missouri, we are very aggressive when it comes to using those funds, and which I know a lot of states are as well. So I'm very pleased by the way it turned out. We've got FAA reauthorization that we're working on right now. Obviously, the ATP, or not ATP, but the airport improvement funds. We're worried about that a little bit. We want to make sure that that money is maintained for our smaller regional airports, which the states are very interested in. Obviously, states do it differently. Some states are block grant states. Some are they just allow the federal dollars to pass through to the airports. But that's one of the things that's kind of up for consideration when it comes to this movement of air traffic control into the private sector, because those dollars they're going to leave those federal coffers and move into that private entity. We can't move dollars back and forth between the private entity and the government program. So we've got to make sure that those dollars are maintained in the Aviation Trust Fund and that they're going to be available. That bill is scheduled to be on the House floor this week. It is stalled at the moment. It'll probably stall in the Senate as well with the Supreme Court justice work that they're going to have to do over there. Whether or not it's picked back up is hard to tell, at least at this point. There is opposition in the House of Representatives to moving air traffic control, so that's one of the reasons, obviously, it's stalled over on at least on our side. WRDA, the Water Resources Bill, we're going to have that up later this year. We moved a good WRDA bill last year. Fairly bipartisan. We should be able to do the same thing this year for states that have inland waterways and obviously have to deal with some of those projects as well. But I don't foresee any trip up in this year's WRDA bill. Now, having gone through all of that, going back to the highway bill, we still have an issue out there with funding. To be quite honest with you, some of the funding that was done was gimmickry, and we've got to come up with more of a long-term solution when it comes to dollars into the Highway Trust Fund. We have obviously a situation, we've got a lot of cars on the road that aren't paying gas tax, vehicles on the road that aren't paying gas tax. We have to figure out a way to recover those dollars. Obviously, they are using the road same as everyone else. And so we've got a couple of projects in there that we're looking at, pilot projects, and one of them is vehicle miles traveled. Having said that, everything is on the table. Everything from tolling, which I'm not a huge fan of, but everything from tolling to vehicle miles traveled to increasing the gas tax to all of those things. We should come up with a solution within the next year or two to figure out how we move forward when it comes to the Highway Trust Fund. But as far as vehicle miles traveled, that seems to be the lead possibility right now. We're kind of taking a look at what Oregon is doing out there. But basically, you have some opposition in the House, too, to what people don't like the federal government knowing where they're going or how far they're traveling. So it may be some sort of a very simple process where we just take the odometer reading from this year to next year. But we have to figure out the mechanics of making that work and how that happens. But that is probably the lead proposal. But we are wide open right now on how we move forward with funding the Highway Trust Fund. And it's still a true trust fund. Those dollars stay in the Highway Trust Fund to be used on highways and bridges. The same thing with the Aviation Trust Fund. Those dollars stay there. They aren't siphoned off as are other trust funds. So in transportation, at least, it's a little bit different. A small note: we've got a highway or a pipeline safety bill that's probably going to be coming up this year as well. We deal with pipelines within the Transportation Committee as well. So, with that, questions, ideas, thoughts, things I should be working on, or we should be working on?
Chairman,
yeah.
You spoke to the issue of the funding patch, if you will, that enabled us to get this long-term bill, and we're very grateful for the fact that we have that. But what sort of a path forward do you see for enactment of user fees? Many have said a freestanding bill with a gas tax increase is probably a non-starter. Are there other ways to get there, in your view?
There are, and as I mentioned earlier, I think it's going to be vehicle miles traveled. If I were guessing right now and looking at a crystal ball, will it be a standalone bill? And actually, it probably will be. And if it is standalone, it won't be an increase in gas tax. And I know some of the states out there, even my own state, are struggling with that as well when it comes to their own match and trying to figure out how you move forward with your state projects. Again, Missouri's no different than any other state, but if it's a standalone bill, it probably won't be a gas tax because it will go nowhere, or at least an increase in gas tax. And the gas tax was never indexed in any of the previous bills, which obviously means that there has to be a dedicated movement to be able to increase that. But I really believe we're going to end up with some form of vehicle miles traveled. I've been proven wrong and could easily be proven wrong on this as well, but if I were guessing, that's where we're going to end up. Maybe tolling, that's a possibility too, as far as allowing states a little more flexibility when it comes to tolling. That gets into a lot of problems with tolling, but that is a very viable option as well.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. You mentioned a water resources bill, and it had been a number of years before the last one was passed, and it included a number of reform measures in it. Do you anticipate any reform measures in this upcoming WARDA bill?
I do, and reform means a little bit or something different to all of us. And a lot of those reforms are going to be targeted towards the way Fish and Wildlife and the way that the Corps of Engineers are obviously managing some of the rivers. The Missouri River, which affects a number of states throughout the Midwest, is one of those rivers that you may see a few more reforms than before. But we're always going to be working on that. The problem with it is too is and how an administration versus Congress see the priorities that are out there and the update of some of the structures. You take the Mississippi River, obviously locks and dams are a huge issue for us on the upper Mississippi, and that's very, very expensive to get the modernization that we need to be able to move forward and update a lot of those locks and dams. It's going to take reforms within the Corps and obviously Fish and Wildlife to be able to move forward with some of the projects that we're looking at. How far we go, it all depends, to be quite honest with you. The Senate's a little bit different than the House. The House, we can pass reforms a little bit easier than they can in the Senate. The Senate takes a little bit longer, obviously, and the Senate has the power of the filibuster. So one individual can hold something up based on whatever their priorities are. So I look for something to come out of the House, and there'll be a lot more reforms in it than maybe you've seen in the past. But again, how that ends up in the final product after it comes out of the Senate as well is yet to be determined. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it, and thank you all for what you do. You're kind of given an impossible task. You know, filling potholes is what a lot of our constituents out there are more concerned with than anything else. But the fact of the matter is, you got to plan and you got to make long-term decisions, and that's tough on how you move those priority and those dollars around, and how you figure out how you meet those expectations. But as I was talking to Missouri folks, we had a mild winter. That's good news, at least in Missouri. I can't necessarily say that for some of the northern states, but hopefully, let's hope that we don't have a big flooding season this year, and we see a lot of the problems we've seen in the past. So, unfortunately, you're in the business of keeping your fingers crossed and trying to get through the next year. But I hope we provided you with a little bit more stability in terms of a 5-year bill rather than doing one short-term extension after another. But thanks very much for the opportunity.
So again, I want to thank Congressman Graves